Good morning. I hope you are having a beautiful morning wherever you happen to be. My name is Andrea, and I am here with DeAnna Batdorff for our every other week Thursday morning Ask Me Anything. We are answering your questions. Questions came in from last week that we're going to be answering, and feel free to put your questions in the chat so that we can see it. Also, feel free to to chime in on where you're coming from and how the weather is with you internally, as well as potentially what the weather's like outside your window. How you doing today, DeAnna?
Doing really good. Yeah,
awesome.
Happy to answer questions. And I know you have quite a few already that have come through. So we'll see how many we can get to with any new ones today. I'm definitely working on keeping it short and sweet because I'm used to making protocols. Full-blown 4-page protocols. So sometimes the questions can be very involved. And I just hope everyone is getting those little pieces they need to get started. And just keep in mind that you can always make an appointment with me. And really, honestly, you can always get a custom blend made if you're looking for something that is going to be specific. But, you know, we've had some really good questions as we've been doing this now for quite a few months. And today is no different. We have many good questions. Yeah.
Exactly right. The first question we have comes from Heather. Heather says they're struggling with broken capillaries all over her cheeks for the last 10 years. She is only putting aloe on her cheeks, tries to eat cooling food, do cooling breath, practice calm mindfulness, all your good cooling stuff, but those capillaries are just slowly and steadily getting worse. So what's your take on that?
Okay, well, there's a few factors. One, I'm gonna first just mention acidic food. And acidic food is not just things that are on this acidic pH balance. Like often people now, acidic has become a bad word. And we want to keep in mind that we have alkaline and we have acidity. Alkaline is cooling, acidity is hot. So if you're just looking at pH balance, we need acid and alkaline. But if we wanted to look at what is maybe driving fire to the surface of your skin, because that's really what's going on with broken capillaries, there is a certain amount of fire that is being driven not down and out through the gut, but it is actually coming out through the skin instead. And so we do have to look at those processed foods. Now, maybe this is somebody who eats really well. We can go a few other different directions with this, but probably the common thing I find is too many nuts, or maybe too much chocolate, or maybe too much coffee through the day. And then maybe perhaps there's too many oily foods getting into the diet. Keep in mind, an oil fire is a pretty quick spreading fire. So oily can be really hard on the skin, and things that are oily do come through the skin quickly. So I would first look at the internal picture, since we know there's fire in this gut that is not moving through the system. And so it is forcing itself out of skin. And there's so much fire coming through that it's breaking capillaries. And that means there's something that is pretty stimulating that's moving through the system. Now, if I was going to add anything else that's acidic and stimulating that could move that quickly through the skin, it would be stress. And it could be anger, since anger is a more fiery stress. And I do think that these are some of the things that, you know, I will get down to with the client eventually, is like, I have a lot of arguments with my partner, or I have a lot of struggle. I have children and I have a lot of struggle, and there's just a constant fight in our home. Or even noticing 2 children fighting, and then you're always trying to break it up or diffuse it. So we can't forget that emotions, I mean, you know, how many times have we gotten frustrated or even stressed out, and then you start sweating, you know, or you turn red. So I would look at the emotional picture and I would look at the food picture. And there's one other thing that we know happens a lot with this. And I have a feeling this person is not in this category. They probably would have figured this out by now, but alcohol is a big one that moves very quickly through the skin. That's why people turn red and flushed and sweat. So again, nuts, coffee, chocolate, alcohol, sugar, oily food, and that could be chips and crackers too. They're quite oily. It doesn't have to just be going out and getting fried food. And it could be too much meat since meat is quite oily. So if something is driving that fire and then that food is still going in, that's going to keep forcing out of the skin. Now, some hereditary bases could be playing a part here. This is really common in my family. A lot of the women have rosacea. If you look at pictures of me younger, I had a lot of redness all through here. And, I've had to just really work on that diet to change that in my life. I mean, my nickname was Apple because I had rosy apple cheeks, and so, there are things you can do. And speaking of that, what can you do? Well, if we don't just look at the food or the emotion, blue cypress essential oil is amazing for this. And it is very mending and healing to the skin. And it's a cooling agent. It has that. It's in the sesquiterpene family of essential oils, which are all your anti-inflammatories. And it happens to be blue in its own right. And that comes from a chemical called azulene. And the sesquiterpene has this beautiful thing that happens in the distillation when the azulene gets released from the plant. And that is really specific to broken blood vessels. We use it for varicose veins. We use it for spider veins, multiple things. I'll even use it like in a wound as nature's Band-Aid. And you're just going to have to use it every day. I'd say, maybe 6 drops. It's not going to take that much. And you can even do that twice a day. And it can go straight on the skin. So you just put 6 drops and you just kind of do a little dab around. And, it is amazing how much you could get a topical anti-inflammatory to cool the skin down. But you just have to be very on it. You're going to have to do it on the regular, and maybe don't expect too many changes, maybe slow change, but don't expect too much change really until you're about 3 months out. But even in 10 days, you should say, oh, that's looking just a little bit cooler. And start tracking those emotions to see, like, when you have any kind of eruption or stress, does it amplify your skin condition? And, that's a tricky one because it's like, okay, well, stop getting angry or stop stressing out. That's really hard to do when life looks like that. But it does mean there's a need for breathing. And I know another part of this question was, or another part of this that you had mentioned to me was this idea that like they're already doing cooling breath. They're doing cooling breath, they're doing things for breath. And so that's really good. But I want to remind us that getting ample oxygen is really the most amazing anti-inflammatory around. So it may not be just doing, say, what's called shita, which is, cooling breath is. But the issue with this, or not the issue, it's a brilliant pranayama, you're not getting full oxygen. So not just cooling breath, but making sure you're expanding on your inhale and collecting oxygen to the brain. And then as you exhale, you're releasing the carbon dioxide and really allowing there to be a cleansing breath all the way back down to the root. So breathing, it sounds crazy, but breathing is really, and proper breathing. So full belly breath collecting oxygen is a whole nother way I could go with this remedy list. But blue cypress would be my go-to. Frankincense is great too. I mention frankincense a lot because, Frankie is like my first aid. I mean, you can use it for so many things. And it would maybe tonify that blood vessel back a little bit more. So strengthen the skin. And so maybe you could do 3 drops of frankincense and 3 drops of blue cypress. if you feel like you wanted to, have more than one plant serving you. But I think blue cypress would be my go-to, and I know how much it changed, my skin. Yeah.
That's great. Great. Thank you. Our next question comes from Martha, who is here with us.
Hi, Martha.
So she is wondering about boils. She says her niece gets boils on her face and forehead, and would bergamot, frankincense help with that as well?
Okay. My wondering here is if this is not boils, but is actually cystic acne. So this is my wondering here. There's not that much difference between a cystic clogged pore, which is what acne is. They look like what we might know as boils. Sometimes, those are interchangeable even in a doctor's office,
Mm-hmm.
So the reason I bring this up is because I work with a lot of cystic acne with teens and even adults, and we do relate that to yeast overgrowth. So the real answer here is to go yeast-free diet. Very hard for someone young, except we are quite driven on vanity. So usually I give a teen like a 10-day challenge, and I'm like, can you go off of all sugars? And I have to teach them what they are, but can you go off of all sugars for 10 days? And if yeast is the problem, the skin will clear up a little, in 10 days. You don't want to expect too much, but it'll show enough significant change where usually if your skin's clearing up, you might just stay away from sugar because you want to look good in the world. And there's nothing wrong with that, actually. I think that's a great incentive program to want to look good. It's very vulnerable to have cystic acne or boils on your face. It's vulnerable at that age. So yes, bergamot was a really good option there, Martha. I agree, because bergamot is one of my #1 antifungals. And you can use it. I talk about it all the time as a zit zapper, so, you could use, at that age, you could use it an easy 10 drops twice a day. And if you are going to get a bergamot, you want to get what's called bergaptine free. Okay. Ours is bergaptine free. And the reason for that is a chemical in bergamot that has to get released because it makes sensitivity of the sun, which means if they started doing just any old bergamot off the market, you go out in the sun and then you get horrible sunburns. So it causes photosynthesis. So just really want to make sure, we're talking about the bergamot that's safe enough to use as we are coming into the sun. So, this becomes more and more important as I get into summertime.
And Martha adds that her niece does not have any other acne. It's reoccurring in the same area. And also she's 33.
Okay, so she's not the teen.
Right, but the yeast does resonate for her because her niece loves to bake. So
oh, how nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, Scott loves to bake, and it's a real problem in our house. At least he's gluten-free now, so that's amazing. So maybe that's a good idea. What if your niece could start looking at like gluten-free baking? Now, let's be clear, just taking out gluten is not going to really just solve yeast. Like, I often have to talk with people who have yeast overgrowth. They're like, well, now I have gluten-free bread and I have gluten-free pasta and I have gluten-free cookies. And I'm like, oh, those are still ground down carbohydrate flours. Yeah. And it's still a problem. It's not as big of an issue. It's a great place to start. Great place to start. So, can she experiment with quinoa flour, or working with amaranth flour or tapioca? And there's some great combos already on the market that you can bake with that just are good to go. Red Mill makes a gluten-free flour mix that is just really brilliant. But I do think, yeast is probably what's going on. Boils on the face are pretty uncommon. Boils on the hips and the butt and the legs and the arms are really common. But if I saw that on a face, I would wonder if that was more cystic acne. So, you know, the other thing would be to maybe, if you wanted, Martha, it depends on what you're asking a question for somebody else. So that's always lovely, but they have to be willing participants. So something that's going to happen for this 32-year-old is maybe ask her, would she like a custom blend that's like a yeast formula where she can start trying to take the sugars. Now, anyone can do a 10-day incentive program. So, not just teens. So can she go off of sugar for 10 days and see if she feels better, feels different, skin's different? And yes, cystic acne does come up in the same pores over and over again. So that idea that she's getting them in the same spot actually leads me even more to cystic acne. They do come up in repetitive places. Yeah, so yeast-free diet is sugar-free. My favorite book is the Body Ecology Diet. It's a little overwhelming of a book just because it is so defined in yes and no and yes and no, but you got yeses in there. And that's what I do like about it. It tells you all the things you can eat, but it really is, and it's been revised. I don't know how many times she has revised that book, but she just keeps getting more and more refined in her knowledge. And it is a go-to book for yeast overgrowth. And the nice thing about that book, and I think I've even seen it online, is it has a symptom list in the front. And it might be interesting to have your niece look at that symptom list and how many of those symptoms does she perhaps have? The fatigue after meals, the bloating after meals, all of these things. And then just know that the more protein intake you have, the less sugar cravings you'll have. So one of the ways I help people get off of sugar is I amplify their protein. And that doesn't have to be meat. That could be, you're allowed to eat lentils. You can have quinoa. There's still grains and legumes you can eat on the yeast-free diet, but they are minimal. Eating fish. And I would probably get this person on seaweed capsules, kelp capsules, 2 in the morning, 2 at night, because it's just so good for getting all the minerals you need to fight yeast. And then it's a complete protein and you're taking it like in a pill, really easy while you're figuring your diet out. So those are some of the things I would be considering here, but that symptom list would be very telling to whether this person has yeast overgrowth or not.
Right.
Yeah, but bergamot is a good
go-to. Great. Our next question is from Amy. Amy says she's predominantly Vata and was diagnosed with uterine fibroids 10 years ago. Wondering if she needs to stay away from dairy. She hardly has a period now. It lasts only 3 days, and then she has spotting for 4 days. So she's wondering how to manage the fibroids so they don't get worse.
Okay. I have some good news, some bad news. The bad news is fibroids are so stubborn. They are very, very stubborn. So I just know as a practitioner that, they take a long time to change. And sometimes, and I've worked with them so much, you would think I'd have figured it out by now. Like I have so many other things. And it really is not an easy one. So that's the bad news. The good news is, it's not necessarily affecting your health on a life or death level. You know what I mean? Yes, it changes things and it's not good to have, a mass in your body, but it is a benign mass, And so, that's one thing I want to say about fibroids. The other thing, there is an amazing, amazing surgeon in Van Nuys, California, and his name is Dr. Junco, Junco. He's from Brazil, I believe. I've been to 2 surgeries with him. He is literally like no other surgeon I've ever met. Yes, I'm giving you the name of a surgeon, but I think it's very important to know a good surgeon. And he not only removes fibroids, but he's never taken someone's uterus, and you bleed the next month. And he's phenomenal. Even just to even talk to him about your options. It depends on how big your fibroid is. If it's little, you got plenty of time. But I've worked with people who, fibroids, they look 7 months pregnant, and I'm going to have to say, let's remove that thing. And even somebody who looks 7 months pregnant, who's the first client I took to him, she found him. It was brilliant. And he just is a master. So I do want to put that out there, just as far as like, it's one of those things where I feel like if you can't get this under control, you need to know who to talk to. The other thing is, since I have seen the surgery and I've seen fibroids with my own eyes, literally with the uterus splayed open, they are tiny white, bound up, pure white fibers that are like a felt ball. And then those felt balls start clumping on each other. And that's what you're feeling inside your uterus. You can get them outside of your uterus too, but they're more common inside. And really in Ayurveda, it's what's called kapha blocking vata. And I'm going to try to explain that, but I think it's important detail. Kapha, something filled a void. So there's a whole emotional story behind fibroids. And the emotional story behind fibroids is there's a void in the womb. For some women, that might be that they wanted a child and it just didn't come to fruition. For others, it might be there was some trauma and it hasn't been resolved. But basically, they see it as what's called kavagunya, empty space that needs to be filled. An empty space that needs to be filled. And so in Ayurveda, they have these very strong beliefs that if you don't figure out how to emotionally fill that void, your body makes tissue to fill it for you. It's not unlike a scar, like scar tissue does the same thing. We get cut open. Now there's a void in the body, and then your body makes scar tissue to fill up the void. Like that's literally what happens. It just happens to be happening inside the uterus. And then it's wound up stressful energy that's like trying to fill a void, and it builds kapha, a mass. Kapha is water, earth, mud, in the concept of excess. And then the body stresses out, filling that kapha, that space, with vata. And so it's called kapha blocking vata. I'm trying to take a very advanced concept and give it to us in simple terms. But I think the fact that you mentioned you were vata, it feels important to give you the doshic equation of your body, yes, stressed out, but it did it to try to fill the void of something. So for you to figure out what that void is as you're working on this fibroid is really important. And then the other question that came up here was dairy or not. Okay, so I told you about what the fibroid fiber looks like for a reason, because it seems like it's a fatty mass. When you touch it on your uterus, it feels literally like a fatty mass, but what you're actually feeling is the strong, pliable muscle of your uterus. And it feels really rubbery and fatty, but it's actually your muscle, your organ itself. And it is not fat at all. There's no fat content in a fibroid whatsoever. So dairy, taking fats out of your diet, that actually is going to stress your body out more, especially being vata. I'm always going to say raw dairy because I don't believe in pasteurized dairy, just in the way that like you took all the medicine out, Sure, they refortified it, but they had to. Everything was stripped out of it. So of course they had to put the vitamin E and D in there, A and D. And so, it's not about fats. And then the other thing is just what's the true remedy for a fibroid? Well, when I went to that surgery, I came home and Scott and I was telling him like, God, I thought these were fatty masses. And I thought they were. So I was treating them with no fats. And I said, it's like wound up. It's like a felt rug. And Scott was like, we have an old felt rug outside. Why don't we put like a bunch of different things on it and see which one breaks it up? I love this. Scott loves to do these things with me. It just is so supportive.
Amazing.
So we put a bunch of kraut in one area, broke it up a little bit. And then we did apple cider vinegar. We soaked the felt rug, totally broke up that felt rug. And then I took some mango. I took mango powder, which is, we have it. It's called amchur, mango seed powder. And we took mango juice. And that actually had the biggest effect of anything we did. So now when I'm treating fibroids, I'm all about fermentation. I'm about enzymatic process. The way we break up dry, bound up fiber is through enzymes, breaking the fibers up so it can dissolve. So the idea that you have a fatty mass, let's take that out of the way, because I've seen them and I know they're not. And now you can go into enzymatic. You can start putting cider vinegar on your food, eating more kraut, get some amchur and start sprinkling that all over your food because it tastes pretty good. It's like sweet and sour. Eat a lot of mangoes, berries, citrus. Now, the only problem with this issue is that'll break up the mass, which is kapha. But those things are not so perfect for vata constitution. So they just need to be paired with the right amount of essential fatty acids. So usually if I'm going to try to do enzymatic with a vata, I'm going to put them on a high dose. It's still relative. It's going to sound like a high dose. It's not that high, but I'm going to put them on 10,000 milligrams of omega oils a day, which is about 10 tablespoons. Normally I would give vata 8 tablespoons. So I'm not even going above and beyond. It's still a very safe amount of fat. And remember, omegas are digestible. So we don't want to think of them as like a saturated fat or getting fat, because they don't do that. But you want to think about the really active omegas, like pumpkin seed oil or black currant oil, which is pretty spendy, but it's the one I'll tell people it's double the price of pumpkin oil. It's way more than flax, but if you're trying to treat a fibroid, it's worth the money. So usually I'll have someone get black currant capsules because you can't buy it any other way. And I'll have them do like 5,000 milligrams of black currant. And then I'll have them get the rest of their EFAs through pumpkin seed oil. So those are the two specific omegas that have the highest amount of enzymes. So I just want to make sure that you're, and maybe a little raw dairy, since you're vata, you do need, to stay grounded, and there's nothing wrong with, we need 15% saturated fat a day, even just to see, think, and move. So we don't want to take it out of our diet or we can't see, think, or move very well. So a little saturated fat, up the omegas, and start thinking about high relation to enzymes. That's really where it's at with fibroids. And since I've been doing that, I have seen fibroids shrink. But usually it's like a little bit every single month over a year or two. I just saw a friend recently who I was doing a massage with, and I found a fibroid. And it was, what did we say? It was 9 years ago. And I said to her, hey, do you still have that fibroid? You haven't even asked about it. And she goes, oh, I've been doing what you told me to do. And like last time I went in, they said it was like the size of a quarter. And I was like, wow, 9 years later, and it's going away, but it's still the size of a quarter. But it was the size of 2 fists.
Wow.
Yeah. So that's, and since you're not going to die from it, she just kind of was like, look, I'm not going to die. I'm just going to if this thing keeps shrinking, I'm just going to keep doing the enzymes, and enzymes are good for the body anyway. So it's not like you're going to deplete yourself as long as you stay, doing also nourishing vata foods. So you don't have to take the nourishment out of your body. You just got to up the enzymes.
Great.
Yeah.
All right. Another question is how to best manage Alzheimer's and dementia.
Whew. That's a big question. That's a big question. Okay. First thing, I always like to know two things. Is there a head injury? And if there is a head injury in this person's past, often I want to know where was the impact. And there's usually scar tissue that is up under the cranial bones. And I start having them do castor packs. And I start having them do cypress essential oil in between the castor packs. Some people have so much dementia and Alzheimer's, you can hardly even treat them. And it's really challenging to do this. Others will let you put a castor pack on them, let them do the cypress. I have them usually do 20 drops of cypress a day. But if there's a head injury, there's scar tissue. And that is one of the things we know can be indicative of dementia or Alzheimer's. That's a little bit of a more complicated, right? Because how do you know how to get to the scar tissue and, all those things, but that's the truth. And the other thing that I have people do is to get blood lab work on heavy metals. So I started doing this because if you remember, we started tracking aluminum about 30 years ago. We started tracking aluminum in people's cooking and aluminum foil use with cooking, and they can track it directly related to people with Alzheimer's. So that aluminum is like a heavy metal. If it leaches and gets into your body, heavy metals are not digestible. And they really start changing the pathways of your nervous system connected to your brain and your body. So heavy metals, and I mean, I've even worked with somebody who they were 87 years old, Alzheimer's. They were, well on their way, but unfortunately still going to be living for many years. And this is the sad part of it. And they got a panel and they had barium. I had found out that they were a painter and I was like, oh, okay. So they checked for he had barium, he had aluminum, he had copper, and he had lead. And we started clearing. He went through and did full on medical chelation. And they started clearing all the heavy metals out of his system. And he really came back. Now, was he the same? No. But was he coherent? And was he able to kind of remember and have functional conversations for another 5 years? Yeah, he did. And so that was really brilliant. He ended up leaving the world from a heart attack. So something completely different occurred. But he was more coherent. And most people just don't see somebody ever get better in dementia or Alzheimer's. We only see people get worse. So I have seen people get better, but it is a tall order. I mean, really tall order. It's not even something that I, would venture out to say, no problem, it's heavy metals, everything will be fine. It's a complicated conversation. And I can't say I'm the most versed in dementia and Alzheimer's. Most people, they kind of give up on that person. They just take care of them until they leave. They don't usually bring that person to me for care. Usually it's kind of like a long drawn out death wish. And they're just kind of like, okay, I'm going to take care of them until they die. So that's not the most common person who ends up in my office for support, unfortunately. So I wish I had more research to share. But if I'm going to be really honest as a practitioner, I haven't worked with that many people with Alzheimer's,
Leslie asks if the chelation was IV or oral.
It was IV. Yeah, it was IV. And I think IV is a good way to go because you're getting it straight to your bloodstream and then filter through your liver. Whereas when you do the oral, it goes via the gut, and that can be really hard on the gut when really you're wanting to do that process through the blood. So,
Makes sense.
you know, I would go, I really recommend the IV direction. Yeah. Something you could think if you're like, well, let me just, you know, what if they don't have access to medical or something like that? You know, in Ayurveda, we use Kala Namak for simple forms of chelation, you know. So Kala Namak is a black sulfur salt. We use sour compounds. You know, oh, we're back to fermentation, actually. Sour is all the things that are fermented, apple cider vinegar, you know, all of our fruits. But we use sour and sulfur compounds to do natural liquefaction of a heavy metal so that you can move it out of the body with ease. I like that in Ayurveda, that they actually liquefy the metals, because, you know, heavy metals are like tiny little irritating shards that start affecting all your nerve endings, you know? And so you want to liquefy that stuff so you can get it out really safely. So if, you know, you just wanted to do something really simple, and most people who need sulfur really like sulfur. So getting them to drink that kind of sulfury black salt isn't so hard for them. That's usually a sign that they need it. Most people that don't need Kala Namak, they try to drink it and they just want to puke. Whereas the people who I give it to and they need it, they're like, why do I like this rotten egg stuff? You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, because you need it. So, and that would be half a teaspoon twice a day. I do work people up, but I'm not going to tell you that variation unless you know there's actually heavy metals, or it wouldn't be ethical for me to talk about deeper levels of heavy metal detox. That would be a consultation. You know what I mean? That would definitely, you know, just because there's some safety issues for the kidneys there. But, you know, you want to cleanse, you want to get your bowels to move and do a little spring cleanse this spring, you know what I mean? You want to just make sure that if you do have calcification, or we all have little bits of heavy metals in our body because of our environment, this would be the time of year to do a half a teaspoon Kala Namak first thing in the morning instead of your electrolyte salt. Because the nice thing about Kala Namak is it's not just stripping you out and leaving you dry, it's a salt. That's the brilliant thing about it. It's a sulfur salt. So you have a cleansing electrolyte salt, which is brilliant. And then you can do that again in the afternoon, or like right before dinners when you'd want to do your next half a teaspoon of Kala Namak. So you can use that as a general cleanse. And then once it starts tasting too strong or starts not feeling good, then you know you've had enough. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Our next question is, how can someone get out of burnout? This is a really relevant one.
We get this question every single Q&A, and there's a reason for it, because we're all burned out.
Yeah.
And it's a real thing. And I'm so sorry for this person for having to be like, what do I do? It's just like such a hard thing. So we're back to the adrenals. I can't go beyond like the fact that burnout dehydrates us. So we got to think about those electrolytes, our omega oils, and our probiotics. Okay, the trine of hydration. So we can't go further than what I talk about all the time. We do have an ebook that explains every one of those and helps you to understand why do you need to assimilate water, electrolytes, absorb water, EFAs, and the core of your hydration is in the epicenter of your health, your gut, probiotics. So those three things are imperative when you're in burnout, because burnout means you've ran out of juice. Your nerves are shot, you know what I mean? And the adrenals have taken over. And those three things, that trine of hydration is what rebuilds the ocean water in your kidneys, and your adrenals sit right on top of your kidneys, and they're going to come to your rescue at any time that your kidneys can't do their job. So we got to keep our kidneys healthy, the oceans of the body, to be able to not run on adrenaline. And I think this is a key thing. And, you know, we're not really taught how the kidneys work with the adrenals or the correlation, you know, like we're not really putting the whole body together anymore. We're just kind of like burnout. And then I'll even say to someone, do you know what burnout means to your body? And they're like, I don't know. And this is really kind of a sad factor that we don't know how our body works enough to know what that really means. So I'm teaching you right now, those kidneys have got, your oceans have got to be ample, and there's got to be hydration and water volume for your adrenals to even calm down and stop that cyclical cycle of burnout. The other thing is going to be sleep. So I can't say enough for sleep. And the sleeping is going to be really, and I had to do this a couple of years ago, running the whole DeAnna Center and all the clients and all my students and all my employees. Somebody, I was seeing a practitioner, and she was kind of like, well, what time do you go home? And then do you get on your computer after that? And I was like, I have no choice. And she's like, really? You have no choice? Okay, that's interesting. And I had to really curb that. So, I mean, Andrea knows, because we've been working together for so long, I used to like crank out emails at like 11 o'clock at night. I'd be cranking out emails and she'd get them in the morning. She's never said a word, but she was probably like, oh my God, it's 11 o'clock. You're doing your emails? And I don't do that anymore. Once in a while, there'll be an emergency, something I had to check on that didn't come through until after dinner, fine. But I had to really shift, like I have to be done by 6, you know, I was going home at 8 or 9, checking emails and then trying to get to bed. Ridiculous. So I have done it too. And it's called burnout. And so whatever you can do, everybody out there, whatever you can do. And I just thought, nothing's going to get done if I don't keep going. Not true. There's always tomorrow. There's always tomorrow. And anyways, we're so instant presto. We all just need to kind of chill a second and stop with the instant presto. And like things can just have to wait for a moment. And I'm sorry, I have to make people wait. And I know it must be frustrating for some people that I make them wait, but I've got so much going on. I can only do so much in a day. And then there's the people still waiting. And then those people still waiting. I could be in burnout too, but I just had to say, done by 6. I need to eat before 8. And even in Ayurveda, I should be doing better than that, but that's what the world looks like. And I don't do my computer after dinner. I don't. And I think it's very important to like stop the insanity, because then you can't rest at night. And that means you're just going to have a whole nother burnout day that's all spun out and stressed out the next day. So it's really about stopping already. How do you stop already? And that means it's got to be like 6 o'clock, I'm done, you know? And so that's my ultimate suggestion. I'm giving a hard suggestion, but it's a suggestion I had to take, and I took it, and it has actually shifted a lot of my reality, you know? So yeah, anything you can do to switch that around. And it's hard for parents. I'm not a parent, but man, it's so hard for parents, because they may not be on the computer at night, but they might be like, my kids are finally in bed, so now I'm going to get all this stuff done. Like you probably know that. And then all of a sudden it's like, okay, and I got to do this and I got to do this. And then it's like, and then the parents are kind of coming to me being like, I can't breathe. I have no room. And it's like, well, you got to figure out when you're going to take room.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You could say you don't have room, but are you going to choose to take room. So can you leave those dishes until tomorrow morning, or can you not make sure your house is perfect? Or can you, what is it that's stressing you out? And can you put it on hold?
Yeah.
Evenings are
Good
precious.
boundaries.
It's a boundary. It's a personal boundary. And the more spun out we are, the more our mind is like, no, I got to keep going. I got to keep going, or I'm going to lose it. And I had to really trust that I wasn't going to lose it. And then I felt really much better when I stopped doing that.
Yeah. I definitely noticed the difference.
Yeah. And when I was doing all that too, I mean, I'd go in and then something would happen, right? And I'd be like, oh my God, freak out.
Yeah.
And it's like, as soon as I stopped and said, no, this is it, I can't do it anymore. I think this person's right, giving me good advice. And now I'm also less pressurized. So my pitta doesn't freak out so quickly, and I can handle something happens. I'm like, okay, that can wait till tomorrow. I've already got a whole thing today. I can do that. No problem. So where I was like, oh, my pitta, and I'm like beating myself up for it. I'm like, whoa, that was crash and burn. So I'm only speaking of my journey because I just want everyone to know that we all are suffering from this, including myself. And I've had to figure out how to curb my habits, because really it's a habit to like, let me get back on my phone. Let me get back on my computer. It's literally an addictive habit. And we have to know, we got to figure out, how are we going to stop that habit? And that's really where it's at. So you got to treat it like an addiction. No, I'm not going back on there. I'm done for the day. And then it feels good because you start, I was stir crazy for a while. I'm going to be honest. I was stir crazy for a while. I even remember mentioning it to you. I was like, I'm going home. And it was 6:30 at that time. I'm going home by 6:30 and I'm not doing anything. And I'm just like, who am I? What am I doing? Aren't I supposed to be available for somebody? You know what I mean? And then I've got my partner. I'm like, how about me? I'm like, oh, how about my garden? Oh, I could go out there. Oh, okay. I could take a bath. I could, but it's a hard shift.
Yeah, bringing yourself back.
So you might have a little stir crazy for a while, but eventually you'll just be happy to have that time and you'll get more rest.
And I think in the past you've spoken about filling that void of spin out with something that is also nurturing for the adrenals. So it's bringing in a nourishing tea to have your kind of calm down time, so that you're like working the digestive aspect as well as the psychological aspect. I wonder if you might speak to some sort of supplemental tools that can also be like a special treat. Like, wow, I'm going to have this amazing tea, and this is part of my self-care here.
Well, it's interesting because, I've always taken care of my eyes and my teeth, and that's why I did those webinars on dental care and eye care. But as I was getting more and more stressed, those things were going to the wayside because I was like, I have too many emails. And I was, not doing them for a couple of years. They were just getting away from me, even though I'd done them for years. And that's really where I shifted at night. I mean, my nourishing tea is amazing. I was just doing the elemental profile class, and it ended with somebody being like, your nourishing tea is the tastiest tea in the world. It's changed my life. And then everybody else was like, give me the link, give me the link. And I was just like, oh, that nourishing tea is so tasty. And the nice thing is you can like mix it with the cleansing in the spring, or you can mix the nourishing with the cooling or the warming. But it is such a good adrenal supporter. And yes, I am all about my little warm tea at night and just what's going to calm me down. And then the other thing I do is when I finished working, and this really came out of, this idea of like, I'm spinning out. I don't even know who I am. No wonder I've been staying so busy. And now what I do is I transition work to home with a neti pot. So I do my neti pot, and neti pot, you're clearing out your third eye. You're calming down your pituitary and your hypothalamus. You're not just clearing your sinuses. You're clearing story. You're clearing the day. And I just need to clear, my work world so I can get to DeAnna world, right? There's DeAnna and there's DeAnna. If you think you're confused, imagine how I feel. So I've had to learn to transition. So I do my neti pot and I just clear the day out. And then I'm kind of like, wow, now I'm me. And then I start, thinking about rubbing my, neem oil on my gums, and just kind of clearing my gums and clearing my mouth because I've been talking all day. So I started doing my dental care as part of my like clearing communications, because it's such a big part of the dental is our truths and communications, and coming clean with like, did I say that right today? Was I respectful today? Did I give good advice? Those things can spin me out when I meant well already. You know what I mean? But here I am spinning. So I decided to take the spinning out and I do my neti, and then I rub my gums with a whole bunch of oil. And, sometimes if I feel like something's heavy on me, I'll just go boil some water and I'll do a steam inhalation. And that's where I love the cleansing tea. I love my cleansing tea for steam. You just put like a couple teaspoons of that cleansing tea in there and it just clears everything up. And I just get myself breathing and expanding. And now I've just taken care of all my upper channels so that I can sort of now decide like, okay, new world, it's DeAnna world. Like, what do I want to do? How much rest do I need? And how much energy do I have for more self-care? So if I have energy, well, then I can go and do a salt scrub and take a tub, or even a shower. I don't even need to take a tub. I might scrub standing up and make it just really, I always scrub standing up, but, taking a shower, and then I can just breathe. And, I like to do some stretching in there and just let the water really hit my back. But these are all things that are about me saying, how do I transition from, taking care of people and being in service into being in service to myself? So these are the things, and then most people know, but I also have another webinar called Weekly Restoration. And if you don't want to burn out, you need to stop every week. So you need to be willing to take that 3-hour stretch, find the space and do a 3-hour stretch. If you can only do 2, fine. But, I do 3 hours and I have a whole entire webinar that's like this, then you do this, then you do this. It's got step by step. It teaches you how to make everything yourself. So it's really inexpensive. There's not like a whole huge, you can buy all those products from me if you got the money and the means to do so and you want to save time. But, I'm actually in that webinar teaching you how to make every single one of those. How do you make a salt scrub? How do you do a steam? How do you do a steam with a seed versus a leaf versus a flower? All of that is in there that helps you to just know how to get the most out of what might even just be in your kitchen,
Great.
So it doesn't have to be expensive. You just got to be willing to let yourself be worth the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's a game changer for my entire week, like a full-on game changer for me to just stop, assess, what's my weather report? How am I feeling clean, about the week past, and how can I do this week ahead different? What do I need? And just set yourself up for success. And then whatever I do in the day, no matter what I eat, even if I eat relatively healthy, it doesn't mean I don't go out to dinner sometimes. you know? So then it just becomes, I have a little more room to not live in guilt or shame over my every single decision all week, because I at least already took my 3 hours to just like stop and pay attention to me and prep me for the week ahead. And that changes the burnout big time.
Exactly. That's some powerful medicine there.
Yeah. And it's a learning curve. I mean, I had it too.
Yeah. 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 We're not really taught at a deep level to really comprehend how essential it is to be secure, be safe, be nurtured in order to connect with others and be a useful human.
Yeah. Yeah. And we're not being told we can, you know, we're allowed to stop anymore either. Everything is full speed ahead. So there's no one saying
right.
stop.
7 days a week, 24 hours a day.
No one is saying stop. No one is saying nourish. We think nourishment is pure decadence. We don't see it as a health value anymore. And that is complicated because that means we're like thinking Vata is the way to go when Vata is like full on dry out and we end up with no juice. And then it flares our fire. And then we start looking for something to ground ourselves out. And then it's often not the right choice. So we have to be willing to nourish if we want to make better choices. We have to be grounded to make good choices.
Yes.
It's an interesting conversation.
Wow. It is. There's a lot going on there, a lot of political threads that we could totally go off on.
Environmental threads, political threads, like work threads. There's so many different things. But all of that is still there tomorrow.
But we have the power to slow it down.
And it's all there tomorrow. So it's like, if I don't find a moment to just be like, enough already, you know, then where am I going to be tomorrow? I'm going to be even that much more depleted instead of that much more ready to face the world.
Yeah. It's like self-care is activism.
It is. Yeah.
Well, another amazing Thursday morning. This has been fantastic. I'm so glad that we've had folks joining us today. I hope that this has helped you start your day feeling inspired and nourished. Don't forget to take some good time just for yourself. You don't have to plug into anything. You don't have to plug into us. You plug into you. Don't forget that you can send us questions during the week through our Instagram, Facebook, send an email to info@deannacenter.com. Stop by our website to pick up a few tools if you need them or get the scoop on upcoming courses. DeAnna's got a couple of things coming up. Your body mapping is coming around again in April, and she's got a brand new course with a dear teacher and friend and midwife, all about birth alchemy, whether you are going to be experiencing birth for your own family or if you are in service to others. It's going to be a tremendous class, so watch for that coming up. Please be sure to subscribe and like this video if you like what you saw, and you can get notifications when we'll be on again. We'll see you again in 2 weeks. Anything you want to add, DeAnna?
Just have a good spring. Enjoy your evenings. You have more sun and more light in those evenings. So just really think about what you can do, you know, and part of this self-care too is taking a stroll, you know, so don't get too stuck in your house. Like, remember, you know, we have a lot of light now until pretty late in the evening. So what is it for you to just take a walk in nature, or just go outside and sit and just really appreciate all the blossoms that are out there. So don't forget to really appreciate all the early spring buds right now. Yeah. Thank you all so much.
All right.